On the morning of May 8, 2019, in the small town of Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, a 15-year-old girl named Riley Crossman disappeared without a trace. What initially seemed like a routine missing person case quickly turned into a shocking murder investigation when Riley's final terrified text messages revealed the horrifying truth of that fateful night. This is the tragic story of a teenage girl who never got the chance to grow up, and the journey to find justice for the girl who was forever frozen at age 15. Riley Crossman was born on December 22, 2003, the eldest child in a family of 3 siblings. She had 2 younger brothers named Reed and Riker. In 2019, at age 15, Riley had a boyfriend, a schoolmate named Hayden, who was 1 grade above her. Their teenage love was incredibly strong, practically inseparable. Sometimes Riley would keep a phone call going for 48 hours straight just to see Hayden through the screen, even sleeping with her phone on, charging while keeping the call active all night. Riley's parents, Chantel and Lance, had divorced when she was very young. According to their custody agreement, all 3 children lived with their mother, while Father Lance provided regular child support. Although he didn't live in the same house, Lance loved his children deeply. Every weekend he made time to visit, trying to make up for lost time and maintain his bond as a father. The small family, despite its upheavals, maintained closeness and warmth. With years of experience in the food service industry, in 2017, Riley's mother Chantel was promoted to manager at a local restaurant. Her career was beginning to look up. But just when everything seemed to be falling into place, love came knocking. In November of that year, through the restaurant owner Don, Chantel met a man named Andy McCauley, who was 39 at the time. Andy worked as an HVAC installer for another company also owned by Don. Occasionally, he would take on odd jobs at construction sites around the area. After just 1 month of brief dating, Andy moved in with Chantel. But from the moment Andy appeared, Chantel's life seemed to turn upside down. Everything began to go strangely awry. At work, the relationship between her and Don became increasingly tense due to disagreements over business direction. Finally, in November 2018, Chantel decided to resign, officially leaving the restaurant she had once been passionate about. Not long after Chantel left the restaurant, Andy also quit his job at Don's HVAC company. Both of them quitting simultaneously infuriated Don, their former boss. But what made Don even more angry was that at the time, Chantel and Andy were still living in a rental house owned by him. After quitting their jobs, they went months without paying rent. The situation reached a breaking point when Don filed a lawsuit against the couple for refusing to pay rent and ultimately evicted the entire family from the house. Although Chantel's behavior in this matter was somewhat wrong, one thing couldn't be denied. She was an incredibly hardworking and devoted mother. Bearing the responsibility of supporting a family of 5 was no easy task, and Chantel's life had virtually no room for rest. Every morning she woke up early to take her 3 children to school. Then she would rush to the grocery store and prepare dinner for the whole family because she had to work 2 jobs every day. During the day, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., Chantel worked at a solar panel manufacturing company called Mountain View Solar. Shortly after getting off work, she would hurry home to change clothes, then rush to a nearby restaurant to work the evening shift, arriving before 5 p.m. Almost every day, she only returned home when the clock struck 10 p.m. At the end of March 2019, Chantel and Andy moved to 15 Greenway Drive, an old house located at a street corner. Although the house wasn't new, the rent was cheap, and it was especially just a few minutes' walk from Riley's high school. They hoped that changing their living environment would bring something positive, perhaps turning around their string of difficult days. However, no one expected that just a month and a half after moving in, tragedy would strike. May 7th, 2019, was a Tuesday like any other, with Chantel busy with her usual routine. She worked both jobs, not returning home until 10 p.m. Exhausted, she dragged herself up to the 2nd floor, intending to stop by her daughter Riley's room to wish her goodnight. But when she reached the door, she noticed the room was still closed. The lights inside were still on, and she could faintly hear her daughter video chatting with her boyfriend. Too tired after a long day, Chantel just stood there for a few seconds, then told herself not to disturb her daughter anymore. She turned and went to her own room to rest. The next morning, May 8th, Chantel should have woken up before 7 a.m. as usual, but that day when she woke up and looked at the clock, it was already 7:17 a.m. Perhaps because she hadn't felt well the night before, she had overslept. Without time to think much, Chantel hurriedly jumped out of bed and quickly prepared breakfast for her two sons, because in less than half an hour, the school bus would stop in front of their house. While busily caring for her two sons, a thought briefly crossed her mind. Why don't I see Riley anywhere? Usually, Riley would wake up around 7 a.m. to prepare for school. She had to be in class by 7:45 a.m., so she would typically say goodbye to her mother early. However, there was nothing too unusual about this. Chantel thought perhaps her daughter had left early to see off her boyfriend Hayden. Today, Hayden's class had a field trip to Washington, D.C., and Riley had surely gone there to say goodbye to her boyfriend. Around 10:13 a.m., while busy with work, Chantel unexpectedly received a call from Denise Deaver, a special friend. Denise was Andy's ex-girlfriend, while Chantel was his current girlfriend, but instead of competing or being hostile, these two women maintained a good friendship. Chantel had even helped Denise find a job at the restaurant where she worked part-time. Denise said over the phone that when driving past Chantel's house, she saw a blue Dodge Ram pickup truck parked by the back door. The passenger door was wide open. Denise paused and continued with a puzzled voice, saying she didn't know if it wasn't Chantel's car, and Andy not only didn't have a car, but his license had been revoked long ago. He always relied on co-workers for rides to work. So, whose strange car was that? Chantel was equally confused, only able to guess that perhaps Andy had borrowed someone's car to come home early. At 11:45 a.m., another message increased Chantel's worry. Andy's boss texted asking, "Do you know where Andy went?" Today, he only worked a few hours, then disappeared. Chantel quickly replied that she didn't know anything, that Andy had left before 5 a.m. and she hadn't seen him since. A feeling of unease began to engulf Chantel. Not only had Andy mysteriously disappeared, but now she also discovered she couldn't contact her daughter Riley at all. Every message she sent sank into silence with unread status, and when she called, she only heard the cold announcement that the phone was turned off. Around 3 p.m., the phone rang again, making Chantel's heart pound. Her mother called with a worried voice. "All the other kids have already come home from school. Only Riley is nowhere to be seen. Do you know where she went?" Chantel glanced at the clock. Exactly 1 hour left until her shift ended. Unable to leave work immediately, she quickly called home and instructed her son Reed, "Go upstairs and check Riley's room one more time to see if she's there. See if she packed any luggage or left any notes." She paused to think, then continued with a voice trying to stay calm. "If there's nothing unusual, then go to her high school. Maybe she's practicing dance for the school performance and will be home late." Chantel reassured herself. Riley coming home late due to extracurricular activities had happened many times before. Moreover, the high school was just across the street from their house, less than a 4-minute walk. After hanging up, 13-year-old Reed hurriedly ran up to the second floor. His sister's room was silent and empty. The boy followed his mother's instructions exactly, quickly crossing the street to the high school to look for his sister. But after searching through all the classrooms, library, dance room, and every possible corner, Reed still couldn't find any trace of Riley. Receiving the report from her son, Chantel felt her heart tighten. She quickly asked her boss for permission to leave work early and rushed to meet Reed at school. Mother and son together systematically checked every area of the school, from the sports field and cafeteria to even the secluded corners with little foot traffic. Calls of "Riley, Riley" echoed throughout the school campus, but were met only with silence. After more than an hour of desperate searching, they decided to return home with the faint hope that perhaps Riley had come home while they were away. But the house remained as cold and empty as when they left. At exactly 6 p.m., While the family was still in a state of extreme worry, the phone rang. The voice from the high school left Chantel stunned. "We want to inform you that Riley did not come to school all day today." This news struck Chantel like lightning. Without hesitation or delay, she immediately called the police. The police responded quickly, arriving within minutes. They conducted a detailed interview with Chantel, meticulously recording every activity and every small detail from the past 24 hours. Efforts to locate Riley's phone via GPS quickly hit a dead end when they discovered the device was completely turned off. Immediately, Riley's missing person information was entered into the FBI's National Crime Information Center system, and a large-scale search in the area was deployed with participation from both family and law enforcement. During this tense time, there was a detail that made Chantel feel confused about Andy's attitude. Just as police were present at the house gathering information, Andy came home from work. When informed about Riley's disappearance, Andy showed clear surprise, but didn't ask many questions. She only saw him silently put down his bag and personal belongings, even leaving his phone behind, then hurriedly grabbed his bicycle saying he would go out to look for Riley. Chantel didn't think much of it at the time, just felt that at least Andy seemed concerned and wanted to help. However, when everyone had searched tirelessly all night and returned home at dawn, Chantel was shocked to discover Andy had been sleeping soundly in bed since who knows when. This image made her feel extremely frustrated and uncomfortable. Although Riley wasn't Andy's biological child, after nearly 2 years of living together, they had become a family. Now, a family member was missing with life or death circumstances unclear, but Andy could calmly sleep as if nothing had happened. The next morning, at exactly 9 a.m., a convoy of police cars appeared again in front of Riley's house. As soon as they got out of their cars, the investigators saw Chantel standing outside, one hand holding a phone in conversation, the other bringing a cigarette to her lips with anxious movements. Noticing she was busy, they decided to go straight upstairs to check Riley's room first. The room was on the second floor, the second room from the staircase. When the door opened, the scene inside surprised the police. The entire space looked like it had just gone through a storm. Clothes, books, makeup scattered everywhere. It was hard to believe this was a 15-year-old girl's room. It looked more like the scene of a break-in. As soon as they stepped in, the officer's eyes were immediately drawn to a school backpack lying right in the middle of the floor, next to the glasses that Riley wore daily. These were 2 items that were indispensable whenever she went to school. Continuing to observe, they discovered Riley's small wallet lying right next to the mattress, with several loose bills and her high school student ID still inside. While the police continued examining the scene, hurried footsteps echoed from the staircase. Chantel had just hung up her phone and entered the room with a worried expression. "I feel something's not right with this room," she said with a trembling voice. Chantel began to recount. "Yesterday morning, my son Reed went up to Riley's room once. He was in a hurry to go to school but couldn't find his socks anywhere, so he intended to borrow a pair of his sister's socks." She paused, looking around the room with confused eyes. Riley wasn't in the room at the time, but Reed remembers very clearly. Although Riley's room was always quite messy, Chantel continued with a more certain voice, Reed absolutely confirms it wasn't messy to this extent, and most importantly, yesterday morning there was absolutely no backpack or glasses on the floor. Reed is very sure of this because he had searched through the room looking for socks. If those things had been in such obvious positions, there's no way he wouldn't have seen them. Chantel pointed toward the head of the bed. And that TV over there, when Reed went up yesterday morning, it was still normally placed on the shelf. Why is it now knocked over on the floor like this? She paused to add, "Oh, before you arrived, Reed already set it upright. Initially, it was lying face down there." The last thing that completely puzzled Chantel. "And the bouquet of flowers in that corner. That's the bouquet Riley just received after her school dance performance. She loved that bouquet very much, always kept it in a dignified position. Why is it now thrown carelessly in the corner like that?" With her son's reminder, Chantel also remembered a few details. She said she remembered yesterday morning before going to work, she had gone to Riley's room to look in the mirror. At that time, there absolutely couldn't have been Riley's glasses in front of the mirror, or she would have definitely noticed. So the question was, who had knocked over the TV and placed the backpack and glasses there? The police quickly ruled out the possibility of outsiders entering the house, because Riley's family kept a German Shepherd. If strangers entered the house, it would certainly hear and bark loudly. But from last night until now, it had been very well behaved, not making any warning sounds. After conducting a meticulous examination of every corner of the room, the investigation team discovered suspicious brownish-red stains on Riley's bedsheets and pillow. The samples were immediately collected and sent for urgent testing. The results confirmed the worst. Both the blood and saliva belonged to Riley. This information was like an alarm signal, completely changing the direction of the case investigation. This was no longer a simple missing person case. Now police had to face the possibility that Riley had been harmed. Based on the evidence collected, they determined the time frame for the crime could be from 10:30 p.m. on May 7th, the last time Riley contacted her boyfriend, to before 7 a.m. on May 8th, when Chantel woke up late and discovered her daughter wasn't home. Particularly, the lack of signs of break-in from outside made police believe the perpetrator was someone familiar within the family. 3 names emerged on the suspect list: Hayden, Riley's 16-year-old boyfriend, Chantel, Riley's mother, and Andy, Chantel's current boyfriend. The investigation process began with checking Chantel's Lexus. However, no suspicious traces were discovered. Through analyzing Chantel's natural reactions when learning of her daughter's disappearance, along with consistent statements from those around her, police quickly removed her from the suspect list. Suspicion about Hayden was also quickly eliminated because on the early morning of May 10th, he had proactively contacted police, saying he had important information to report. Hayden said that on the evening of May 7th, as usual, he was continuously on video chat with his phone. During that time, Andy had entered Riley's room several times, asking Riley if she wanted to come downstairs to clean up the book room or wash dishes, and he was ready to pay Riley pocket money. Hayden described in detail Riley's annoyed attitude toward Andy's behavior during the video call that evening. She was very frustrated with Andy casually entering her room without knocking, then making suggestions about doing housework for money. Riley had immediately refused and showed she wanted Andy to leave her room. After Andy left, both continued their familiar video conversation, talking through the camera, while also exchanging private text messages. Time passed until around 10:30 p.m., when Hayden said he had to sleep early to prepare for the Washington, D.C. trip with school the next day. The two had said goodnight to each other and ended the call. The next morning, May 8th, Hayden woke up and performed his daily routine, deleting all chat messages with Riley from the previous evening. He explained that this was a habit of both of them because they were afraid their parents would read their private messages and be unhappy. The trip to the capital went as planned, but what made Hayden anxious all day was not being able to contact Riley. Every call went to voicemail. Messages sent seemed to disappear into the void. This feeling of worry increased when he thought about how Riley had never completely turned off her phone like this before. When the bus returned to school after 5 p.m., Hayden had barely stepped off when he encountered Chantel standing there waiting with a worried expression. Chantel asked if he knew where Riley was, and only then did Hayden realize his girlfriend hadn't come to school all day. Returning home after the trip, the feeling of unease in Hayden's heart became increasingly heavy. He opened his phone hoping to find some message from Riley, but then remembered he had deleted all conversations from early morning. Suddenly, a thought flashed. His Apple Watch was still synced with messages from his phone. With trembling hands, Hayden opened his smartwatch. It turned out that after 10:30 p.m., when Hayden had fallen asleep, Riley had sent a series of urgent messages at 11:01. The content of those messages was full of fear. Riley reported that Andy was in her room, asked Hayden to stay quiet because she was afraid of being heard, and finally confessed that she was very scared. The next morning, with support from his parents, Hayden quickly went to report to police and provided crucial evidence from his Apple Watch. In fact, even before receiving information from Hayden, the investigation team had begun focusing on Andy. In initial interrogations, Andy's attitude seemed quite unusual. He appeared tense and unnatural when facing police questions. When they looked up Andy's record in the system, The information that appeared further increased suspicions about this man. Andy McCauley was born on March 12, 1978, into a broken family. Andy grew up under the care of his mother, Brenda, a heavy drug addict. This toxic environment pushed Andy onto a dark path from very early on. In 2 consecutive years, 2010 and 2011, he and his mother were arrested for drug trafficking. Time in prison didn't seem to help Andy wake up. After getting out of prison, he continued using drugs with his mother until 2019. On May 10th, with important information from Hayden, police officially summoned Andy for questioning. Following standard procedure, they took full-body photographs of the suspect before beginning the interview. What they discovered caught everyone's attention. While Andy's right hand was completely normal, his left hand had many suspicious wounds. From the palm to near the thumb, clear scratches appeared. Not stopping there, both of Andy's arms also had similar signs. When he took off his shirt for a more thorough examination, scratches also appeared on his left side and lower abdomen. Most notably, a day earlier, the scene examination team had discovered blood at the bathroom door of Riley's house. DNA test results confirmed this blood belonged to Andy, a detail that made it difficult for him to deny. Faced with interrogation pressure, Andy gave a fairly simple initial statement. He insisted the last time he saw Riley was around 9 to 10 p.m. the previous evening when she was still in her room. As for himself, Andy said he had gotten up at 5 a.m. to go to work, accidentally leaving his phone at home. Throughout the entire workday at the construction site, he didn't leave the workplace until evening when he got off work and returned home. The investigators had no patience for Andy's contradictory statements. They frankly told him they had a witness who saw him driving home at 10:13 a.m. on May 8th. Faced with this specific evidence, Andy was forced to change his statement. With fake surprise, Andy admitted that he had remembered he actually did come home once. According to this new version, around 9 a.m., he had driven from the construction site to a nearby gas station to buy drugs. After buying the goods, he went home to use them, then returned to the construction site. Andy insisted this entire process only took from an hour and a half to at most 2 hours. However, Andy's new story quickly revealed major holes when investigators began digging into details. They asked how Andy knew there were people selling drugs at that gas station and what the seller's name was. These were basic questions that anyone who actually bought drugs would have to know. Unable to provide convincing answers, Andy once again changed his statement. This time he said he had called his nephew when he arrived at the gas station. To excuse not being able to provide contact information, Andy explained that his nephew lived in a remote wilderness area, so there was no way to contact him. Andy's increasingly absurd excuses made the investigators lose all patience. They decided to end this charade with a simple but fatal question. An investigator looked straight into Andy's eyes and said coldly that he had supposedly left his phone at home that morning, so how could he have called his nephew? This question was like a direct punch that completely knocked Andy down. He stood there speechless, his face pale when he realized he had fallen into an inexplicable contradiction. By May 11th, when the next interrogation took place, police had prepared detailed data from Andy's phone. They no longer needed to guess or rely on contradictory statements because the undeniable numbers told everything. Call records showed an astonishing detail. At around 2 a.m. on May 8th, Andy had made 18 consecutive calls to Don, his former boss. Not only that, he also sent a series of messages to this number. The strange thing was that the relationship between Andy and Don was purely work-related. After Andy quit his job, the two had absolutely no personal contact and had lost touch for over 6 months. So why on that fateful late night did Andy frantically try to contact someone with whom he had virtually no close relationship? Faced with undeniable evidence, Andy once again came up with a completely new story. He explained that around 2 a.m., his drug addiction had kicked in, forcing him to go out to buy from someone named Bobby. On the way home after the transaction, he happened to pass by the area near Don's house. According to Andy, here he suddenly saw a police car parked on the roadside with warning lights flashing. This scene made him panic, thinking the police were looking for him. In his panic, he continuously called and texted Don, begging his former boss to open the door and let him hide in the house. However, investigators quickly refuted this story. They had checked the deployment records of local police forces and confirmed that around 2 a.m. on May 8th, there were absolutely no patrol cars operating in the area Andy mentioned. Another detail that increased suspicion about Andy was his work situation. The construction site where he worked was about an hour's drive from Riley's house. Since he had no personal vehicle, Andy had to rely on coworkers for rides every day. Andy was notorious for waking up late and being lazy. Usually by 5 a.m., coworkers had to come knock loudly on his door before he would slowly wake up. But on the morning of May 8th, everything was completely different. Andy not only woke up very early but also proactively contacted his coworker. At 4:26 a.m., he had called asking where his coworker was and when he could come pick him up. At 5:04, he called again to urge. When the coworker arrived, they were surprised to see Andy already standing ready at the door, something that had never happened before, as if he was very eager to leave the house. The most obvious contradiction in Andy's statement was that he had just made 2 consecutive calls to urge his coworker, but immediately upon getting in the car claimed he had forgotten his phone at home. This absurdity made everyone suspicious. To verify information, police had traced data from cell towers in the area. Results showed that in all the previous workdays, Andy had never forgotten to bring his phone to work. His mobile signal always appeared regularly at the construction site every day, but only on May 8th, the day Riley disappeared, Andy forgot his phone at home. Although Andy had become the #1 suspect in police eyes, they still lacked concrete physical evidence to prosecute. Therefore, Andy was temporarily released home while the investigation force focused on searching for Riley and gathering more evidence. Through analyzing data from network providers, police determined that Riley's phone had lost connection with cell towers at exactly 3:13 a.m. on May 8th. This meant that at that time, someone had turned off or destroyed the girl's phone. According to camera data, Andy had left the construction site at 9:05 a.m. on May 8th and only returned at 1:43 p.m. Total absence time was 4 hours and 38 minutes. 2 hours and 38 minutes more than the figure Andy had previously reported. The most suspicious detail lay in Andy's travel route after leaving home. Instead of going straight on Route 9 to return to the construction site as stated, he had gone in a completely different direction. Surveillance camera systems along the roads had recorded the vehicle's journey, including stopping at the gas station Andy had mentioned. However, when checking all cameras at the gas station, police saw no one contacting or making transactions with Andy. This completely refuted the story about buying drugs he had made up as an excuse. Andy's car finally drove to a remote mountain area about 40 minutes' drive from Riley's house. This was a desolate area with little foot traffic, very convenient for concealing crimes. Investigators believed the reason Andy deliberately hid this part of the journey was because he needed time and location to dispose of Riley's body. Exactly 1 week from the day Riley disappeared, on May 15th, police had enough grounds to obtain a search warrant. They conducted a thorough inspection of the pickup truck Andy had used on the fateful day. On the truck bed, they discovered white lime stains, the type of material commonly used at construction sites. Inside the cabin, besides usual work tools, they also found large industrial garbage bags. But the most convincing evidence came from the police team's working dog. When brought to inspect the vehicle, the dog continuously gave warning signals at the left side of the truck bed. Through monitoring surveillance cameras and determining the last location where Andy's vehicle appeared, police deployed a large-scale search in the remote mountain area near Martinsburg. On May 16th, after many hours of non-stop searching, they finally made a heartbreaking discovery. Riley Crossman's body was found in a patch of wild grass far from all trails. Heavy decomposition prevented forensic experts from determining the exact cause of the girl's death. Riley was found lying on a large black industrial garbage bag. The condition of her clothing showed alarming signs. Her top was pulled up to her shoulders and she wasn't wearing a bra. Her jeans were pulled up very high in an unusual way, while her underwear inside was torn. Clearly, all clothing had been clumsily rearranged by someone after the crime occurred. Another notable detail was that only Riley's left foot had a shoe, while the other shoe, along with some other personal items, were found scattered in 2 other black garbage bags nearby. On Riley's right shoulder, investigators discovered white lime stains. After analysis, this type of lime completely matches the lime sample found on Andy's truck bed. The final and perhaps most convincing evidence came from screws found scattered around the scene. These were special screws, custom manufactured, and not available at any ordinary hardware stores in the area. The nearest distribution point was as far away as Pennsylvania. However, a suspicious coincidence was that the construction project Andy was involved in was one of the few places using exactly this type of rare screw. When all evidence was pieced together, Andy McCauley was officially arrested on charges of first-degree murder. However, due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the trial for Riley's case was postponed and only conducted in September 2021. Based on a comprehensive review of evidence from surveillance cameras, phone call records, and witness testimonies, the prosecution team recreated the entire sequence of events on that fateful night. Riley's last message was sent at 11:17 p.m. on May 7th with fearful content that she was very scared. Unfortunately, Hayden was already deep in sleep and couldn't receive this desperate cry for help. From 11:17 p.m. until after 2 a.m. on May 8th, Andy had assaulted Riley in her own room. Riley had tried to resist and call for help, leaving deep scratches on her attacker's body as evidence of her fierce resistance. To prevent Riley from continuing to call for help and wake others in the house, Andy had used a pillow to continuously press against the girl's face. This cruel action caused Riley's saliva and blood to stick to the pillowcase. When Riley was no longer breathing, Andy realized the serious situation. He wanted to flee immediately but encountered a major obstacle. He had no means of transportation. In his confusion, Andy could only temporarily hide Riley's body in the room, then go to the bathroom to wash the wounds on his body. While hurriedly opening the bathroom door, he accidentally left his own blood on the doorframe. After washing, Andy fell into a state of extreme panic. He needed to find a car to handle the consequences of the crime he had just committed. In desperation, Andy made 18 consecutive calls to Dawn, accompanied by a series of pleading messages, but all fell into silence. When he received no response from Dawn, Andy decided to seek out Bobby, the drug dealer he knew. Bobby later testified in court, recounting that when he met Andy that night, he noticed Andy's hair was still wet, clearly having just showered. Call records confirmed this meeting took place at 3:03 a.m. on May 8th. Realizing that neither Bobby nor Dawn could provide him with a car, Andy was forced to come up with another plan. He decided to wait until going to work to steal his coworker's car to carry out his plan to cover up the crime. The next morning, Andy displayed a completely unusual attitude when he proactively contacted his coworker very early. When getting in the car after 5 a.m., he deliberately left his phone at home, a calculated action because he knew police could track location signals. Andy had planned the timing very carefully. Knowing that Chantel's 2 sons started school at 7:50 a.m. and Chantel went to work at 10 a.m., he chose 9 a.m. to act. Without notifying any coworkers, Andy quietly drove away from the construction site. He calculated precisely, waiting until just after 10 a.m. when he was certain Chantel had left home for work, before driving back. As soon as he got home, Andy hurriedly ran up to the second floor to Riley's room. In his haste, he placed Riley's glasses and backpack down to create a false scene, then dragged the girl's body downstairs and stuffed it into the truck bed. He also didn't forget to take Riley's phone. Due to his hasty actions, he knocked into Riley's TV in the room, but he no longer cared about these things. He had to act quickly because once the school discovered Riley wasn't attending, they would very likely contact Chantel. He had to complete everything as quickly as possible. Andy then drove to this remote mountain area, wrapped Riley in 3 layers of garbage bags, and threw the 15-year-old girl's body into the bushes. Fortunately, when he parked the car at home, it had been seen by his ex-girlfriend Denise, and later, his vehicle's journey was recorded by surveillance cameras everywhere. It was also through following surveillance video along this route that police finally found Riley's body. Throughout the trial process, Andy displayed coldness, showing no remorse whatsoever. Finally, The sentence given to him was life imprisonment, without possibility of parole. And that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along and see you in upcoming videos.